Hope you guys are ready. You already heard the reading. It talked about a coin. This is maybe a little taboo, but this is a sermon about money. You guys excited? Oh boy, a pastor talking about money. That's what you try to avoid, right? No, geez, they're talking about money. But it's a very big deal. And I'm sorry, but did you know this? Jesus talks about money a ton. So I'm stuck, guys. I got to talk about money because Jesus talks about money. Little nerdy Bible fact. Did you know 2,300 verses in the Bible are about money and resources? Ooh, that's a lot. 15% of Jesus' preaching, it's about money. 11 of his 39 parables are about money. So guys, I'm sorry, you're going to have to hear it sometimes. We're going to have to talk about money, despite it being impolite, despite it being a taboo topic. We talk about money because money is such a big part of our lives. If I had to guess, that's why Jesus talks about it so much, is because money has this way of affecting our choices. It has a way of affecting how we live our lives. It has us affecting our decision making. We're always weighing cost, benefit. We're constantly thinking about money. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. This week, compared to last week, which was fun, what a baffling parable that was. This week just seems so straightforward, and I'm kind of bored by it. I'm going to be honest. It just seems so boring to talk about money. It just seems so boring. Obviously, you give to Caesar what's Caesar's, you give to God what's God. Who here is baffled by this? Who here is stunned by this? I do, though, think there is something maybe a little interesting is in this reading. I don't understand it, but they said the Pharisees came to Jesus with this question. But does anyone remember who they teamed up with to trap Jesus? Herodians. And you're going, so what? But that's not a so what. These are actually rivaling factions of Judaism. Pharisees, obviously, like I said last week, they think Herod's a joke. They think Herod shouldn't be king. He's a fake king. He's a puppet king. Herodians, based on their name, Herod, right, would think Herod's fine. We should be happy with Herod because really, Rome could easily just... They've let us live this way and they've let Herod be king, so why don't we just go with that? Why don't we just stick with Herod? They're actually very much okay with that status quo of, look, I get it. There are some rules that aren't ideal, but Herod's in charge. We're still Jewish. We're still very much in Herod's people, right? And Pharisees are like, yeah, but Herod makes lots of mistakes. So there are these completely different ideologies that have together teamed up because if there's one thing they can agree on, and this is really saying something for old J-Man, they can't stand Jesus because Jesus is a threat to both parties. Jesus is this disestablishment idea of like challenging so many Pharisees. But then he's also, this is Jesus. People are calling him king. Do you think Herodians, King Herod's people, would be like, that's great. I'm glad you're calling him king. No, that's a concern, a big concern. So they've teamed up because really Jesus in this question is in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If he says, yes, pay your taxes, he's a betrayer of his people. To say you should pay taxes aren't weird. Temple taxes have existed for a long time. In this time, they've made peace with taxes. But this is a tax that they say is paid to the emperor. The tax that's paid to the emperor is a census tax. Census is referenced a few times in the Bible as something that's a no-go for the Jewish people because they do not like the idea of your very existence being taxed. And to give to an emperor means you're participating in this idea that the emperor somehow owns these people. According to them, who owns people? God. God owns people. So there's no census tax. Herodians are like, it's not ideal, obviously, but Herod's in charge. Look, there are sometimes you just got to pay the bill for Roman occupation. Them's the breaks. So if he says, don't pay your taxes, the Herodians are going to go, dude, don't you understand? You got to pay the toll. If Romans are in charge, that's what you got to do. If you don't pay the tax, I'm within my right to punish you and also rat you out to the Romans for not paying taxes and encouraging others to not pay taxes. So regardless of what Jesus says, these two parties are going to be satisfied. Because Jesus will inevitably mess up. And Jesus deftly handles this, right? He says, let me see a coin. Someone has a coin. A point. Jesus doesn't have a coin because Jesus is broke. It's important to realize he's a wandering preacher. He doesn't have a lot of dough. So he says, give me a coin. And everyone has one because, who wouldn't? If I asked for $1, would somebody here have $1? No, says Steve. I don't have $1. I'll take Venmo. I'll take PayPal. Whatever. Zelle. But the idea is they would have this. So they take out this coin, and he does the thing where he says, you give to Caesar what's Caesar's. And the Pharisees are like, oh! Because this paying taxes, he goes, bah, 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 bah. But give to God what's God's. And they're like, whoa. It says they're amazed. I'm sorry, is anyone here amazed? No. That's really, not, duh. Maybe it's because last week was just such a cool parable and this one just seems so straightforward, but I think I'm maybe minimalizing how powerful this is. Paying what's Caesar's to Caesar makes sense. But I really think there's this challenge to us about what it means to give to God what belongs to God. I think all of us think that's unremarkable because if I would ask you, where does everything come from? You'd go, God, right? We're good, faithful people. We come to church on Sunday. But do we act that way? I know we understand all things come from God. What belongs to God? Everything. Do we act that way? I would honestly say one of our highest virtues is the virtue of ownership, right? To own something. Own our home, right? You don't want to rent, you want to own. It would be lovely. Own your own business. Be your own boss. You'd be independently wealthy. It's kind of an ideal, is just this idea that I am myself, that I own me, and I'm responsible for my success or my failures. I'm my own person. Oh, no. But then we have all these parables. We've had a heap of parables, right? And repeatedly, when Jesus talks about parables and Jesus talks about the kingdom, God's hope for all of creation, we're stuck with this idea. We're really bound by this. Every time in those parables, if we're thinking about who we are we ever the owners? No, we're tenants, workers in the field. We're servants, slaves. Never at any point is in any of God's fulfillment, this image of God's realization, are we ever to possess things. And I think that's really good advice because has anyone seen the pain that comes from ownership? There is a lot of pain, and actually there's a lot of hurt to people that sometimes comes from us. You know that a lot of wars are fought over land disputes. Who owns what? A lot of violence comes from ownership. A lot of rules and laws are about ownership. Ownership laws makes up a big chunk of what we do in arguments. Who owns what? Not to mention the embarrassing history of humanity in general of owning people. We're opposed to this idea. No, God owns things. We know this, but something in us struggles with ownership. We want to own. And here's Jesus saying, give to God what's God's. We all know. I think we all know what that is. Everything. We give all things to God. That hierarchy has been destroyed of somehow money resides in some other department of reality where That's about me. That's about what I own. That's what I made. That's where my pride resides. I'm sure you all have things you're proud of. It's very human. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I have things I'm proud of. I just told a whole church about my incredible action figure collection. I'm kind of embarrassed by it, to be honest. But anyways, but there are things that I'm proud of. Maybe you have something you're proud of. Maybe it's the hard work you've put towards owning a vacation home, or maybe the hard work you've put to becoming your own person. I get it. But are we really our own? I think that's a really hard thing for us to grasp, and I think that's a really big challenge that Jesus puts forward. I'm going to tell you guys a story about this person who taught me about ownership that I think will help you understand as much as it's helped me. Dr. Mark Allen Powell is a Matthews scholar, and he's a professor, and whenever he leaves, he gets a house sitter, and he usually picks a student from Trinity Lutheran Seminary, one of the students who live in the efficiency suites. So it's these little apartments, and he goes, "Would you house sit for me?" And they go, "Yeah," because they want to befriend a professor, right? This person gets their grades. So they're like, "Yeah, absolutely." And what's really wild is this house sitting gig, he routinely tells them, "I do hope you'll use the space." Because he knows they live in this little apartment. He goes, "Use the space. Throw a dinner party. Have people over. You'll finally have a big kitchen. Do you like to cook?" They're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Use it. Cook something. Invite people over. I don't mind at all. I want you to use the space." What a genuine, generous person. I love this. And he said, so after that would happen, I'd come back. I could probably expect it's going to be just fine, or I could be honest with myself and understand if they're hosting a dinner party, a plate might get broken. That's what it costs. You know? That's what it costs. I get it. He's hoping there won't be like cigarette burns in the couch. He's hoping the curtains didn't catch fire in an enormous house party with a bunch of randos. He's hoping for that. But he said, I have to be honest, that's possible. I've given ownership of my house to somebody to look after it, and they might use it poorly. He said, that's a lot like stewardship. That's a good way of thinking about ownership and caretaking and the difference between them. He says, God has given us everything, right? God has given us air to breathe. God has given us food to eat. God has given us the ability, minds to create shelters, careers, etc. But God hopes, with all the abundance of goodness God has given us, we would never have somebody be hungry. There's enough food to feed everybody. But people go hungry. God would hope, with the value we put on our own lives, we would never carelessly take someone else's. And God mourns that. God's heart breaks. But he says, that's like breaking or mistreating a home. He goes, the real danger that I would say concerns God more than anything is, imagine if the person who is house sitting for me, I come home, I would be sad, obviously, if they wrecked my house. But I'd be more alarmed if I got there and the keys didn't work. They changed the locks, right? And when you see them, they go, oh, I sleep here. I reside here. I look after this place. I've taken the trash out. I've made that bed or not made the bed. So I lie in that bed. This is my home. I look after it. He says, that of all things is what Jesus is concerned about, especially here in this Matthew text, is to never lose your mind in thinking this is somehow not God's. He says, we're living on this planet. I hope we never confuse ourselves and think this is ours. It belongs to us now. What we make of it was what we make of it. It's like, well, it isn't. It never was. If Jesus is concerned about something, it's the confusion, the lie we tell ourselves of ownership repeatedly. This belongs to us. Money is no different. Money, just like everything, is a tool. It's not something to be worshipped and loved, admired, protected, kept, owned. It's something to be used for the kingdom come. Right? We know this. But in practice, what does it look like? I can tell you, I've seen glimpses of what the capacity is for resources to change people's lives. I've seen how Taft has changed people. It costs to do that, you know? I've seen how the work in Haiti is transformative people. That's just our resources and the incredible work of Haitian people to lead. But they need those resources. So we send resources, money, gifts, whatever we can to help support that work. That's a holy use of something God has given us. That's a tool that God has given us to further the kingdom. I want you all to know, he's talking about coins, but he's talking about everything. Every particle of our being is for the purpose of serving the kingdom. And for that reason, we get these texts that sometimes seem pretty simple. Obviously, you give your bit. Obviously, you pay your taxes. Everyone here pays their taxes? You really should. You'll get in trouble if you don't. Obviously, we pay our taxes. But our lives, that includes money. Our lives, that includes our resources, our time, is for the purpose of serving the kingdom. Following Jesus reforms our understanding of money as something to be cared for, protected, into something that can be used. So, Good Shepherd, how are we going to use all that God has given us to further the kingdom? That's our question. That's what we're living into every day. Amen.